What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the final episode of Lowne Aerospace 2, the second one, a series in which we unlock the entire tech tree in Kerbal Space Program in science mode. And this is the last episode. I said last week, well actually last week was supposed to be the final episode, but I was 500 science points short, so I put it to the comments, where should we go for the finale? And everyone said asteroid capture, because the asteroid captures don't actually yield that much science. So I will do an asteroid capture very soon, but in terms of kind of finishing this series and unlocking the rest of the tech tree, we had to go to a celestial body that could, we could yield science from. And so we're going to go to Dres, which was, to be fair, the second most requested place, and I think one of the most underrated places to visit in the Kerbin system, to be quite honest with you. I know it's a bit of a meme that Dres doesn't exist, Dres is boring, Dres is this, Dres is that, but really it's actually one of the most interesting destinations in terms of its actual geography, because unlike most planets in this game, to be fair, the squad have made good improvements in enhancing the surface of the planets, but for the most part they are still pretty flat and uninteresting. And Dres is also pretty flat and uninteresting for the most part, but it has a very cool canyon. The Dres Canyon, coupled with maybe the Mo Hole as well, one of the most interesting kind of topographical places to visit in the Kerbal system. And so that is a reason why we're going to go there. This is me building the ship, by the way. Dres also has a deceptively high delta V requirement. It's relatively close to Kerbin. It's in between Juna and Joule. And it itself has a very small gravity well. It only takes about just under 500 meters per second to land on and then take off from again and get back into low Dres orbit. So you wouldn't think it would need much delta V, but it's pretty high above the sun and it's on quite a sizable tilt. So to kind of make sure we definitely have enough delta V for this mission, especially from the perspective of trying to make this as beginner friendly as possible, as in this could be a good kind of platform to base your first Dres mission on, I've added a little bit more fuel than we really need. I've gone for about 5,000 meters per second, which is more than we really need, but it definitely ensures we have enough to account for any kind of inclination changes or if we're not getting our encounters dead on. Now, I'm just time warping to a transfer window to Dres, which is about 90 degrees. I think it's like 89.1 degrees or something like that, but for all intents and purposes, 90 degrees. When I say 90 degrees, I mean if you were to draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Dres, the angle it forms at the sun would be 90 degrees, but guys, we're getting a car. We've launched the ship now. I don't know what I was doing there. But yeah, just to run down, hopefully if you have been playing along with this series, which I'm guessing you probably haven't, but if you've been using the tutorials of this series to build up on your own skills, then in theory, you've already done your Minmus return, you've already done a Mun return, a Juna return, a Gilly return, and an Eve return too. So hopefully the actual procedure of launching a rocket no longer needs any introduction to you, so I'm not going to talk about much in this mission, to be quite honest with you. This is just the big finale. If you need, I'm basically putting everything I've shown you into practice and executing it like you see on screen. So hopefully if any of this is alien, what I'm trying to say, sorry, I'm trying to rush. I haven't got much time to make this video because I'm going away this week, so I basically have 2 days to make this video. So I'm just making I got back from work at about 5:30 and I just sat down, built the ship, did the mission, recorded it all, and now I'm editing it all. It's 9:15. I've not eaten anything all day. I'm losing my mental. I'm losing my psyche. I feel like I was in the middle of a sentence when I went on that tangent. But yes, I'm not going to talk about too much in great depth in this mission. I kind of want you to just see it and then just see how it's done. Obviously, for the stuff that's exclusive to going to Dres, I will talk about. But that's it, really. And there go the fairings, and we can see that, yes, this is, in fact, hopefully you've probably cottoned onto it after watching the build that I didn't talk about at all, but it's a very similar lander to my previous ones. This is an Apollo-style mission in that we're going to send a separate lander down to the surface of Dres. It'll do all the science down there, and then redock with the mothership. My original plan for this mission was to then go up to one of... Dres doesn't have any moons, or satellites, I should say, if we're going to use the correct terminology there. It doesn't have any satellites around it, but it does have an asteroid belt, but it never spawned for me. And I did a quick Google, and apparently the Drestroid belt, as it's kind of colloquially known, the Drestroid belt doesn't actually appear until you do a flyby of Dres for the first time, is my understanding of things anyway. So unfortunately, we couldn't do kind of a mission up to one of Dres's asteroids, which, reinforces that fact that we definitely need to do an asteroid redirect mission very soon. I promise that we will. Now, to get our encounter with Dres, I'm making a maneuver node from low Kerbal orbit and getting our apoapsis to the right point, and then I'm making a second maneuver node on our ascending node to do the inclination change. And as you can see, we get a very nice encounter just there. I'm not going to make sure it's like dead on because Dres's sphere of influence is tiny. In fact, I think it's probably the smallest of all the planets relative to nothing. It is the smallest sphere of influence of all the planets. So I'm not going to worry about getting an encounter straight off Kerbal because chances are by the time we actually execute the burn and do the inclination change, enough variability between the maneuver node and the actual burn will have happened that the encounter won't be there. So I'm just going to make sure the encounter nodes are as close as possible that we can really get, but I'm not worried about it being a dead-on encounter. I mean, obviously, if you do the nodes and you get an encounter, then more power to you. But I'm not going to worry about doing it until we get into deep space and we can do slightly more accurate maneuver node burns. But as you can see, we are well underway for doing our initial escape burn from Kerbal. So I can talk a little bit about some of the things we can see on screen. I was going to say the Kerbals, but now they're not on screen because I'm showing the map view. Anyway, the Kerbals. I said that we would bring Valentina. I realized that I haven't brought Valentina on any mission whatsoever for this entire series. I guess because I've always been focusing on Bob Kerbal because he's the only scientist you get by default. And then Jebediah is, look at that face. I own a plush doll of Jebediah. He's got to come. And then after that, it's like, well, we've got the two Kerbals there. We've already got a pilot and a scientist. May as well bring an engineer to balance things. We can do things like repair wheels if we need to, even though I've never done any mission that involves wheels. But whatever. I'm making up for Valentina's lack of showcasing in this series by bringing her on this one. And that's the reason why we've got a 2-seat lander as well. So Valentina can come to the canyon as well as Bob. Bob has to come because he can reset the science containers. But it's now gone. But I just made a maneuver node exactly the same as the one we planned earlier, just a normal burn at our ascending node. And then I did a quick drag on the retrograde to pull the grey indicators nice and close. So it's a fairly expensive burn, as all inclination changes are for the most part in Kerbal Space Program. Hence, like I said at the beginning, one of the reasons why Dres has a deceptively high delta V requirement to reach. But it's not a problem. We have more than enough fuel in this ship. And we can just go ahead and execute that burn. Not much more to say about it really other than just there it is going. So what we can do now is we can pan around on the map screen and just watch that apoapsis move down. Before the burn I should say is completely finished, I'm actually going to close the maneuver node and just watch it manually. So we can hit the little X in just a second when I've got the camera in a better position. Carry on with the burn now, and there you go. We can see those grey indicators come. And I said that Dres's sphere of influence is very small. That means the slightest burn will send our kind of orbit around the planet shooting off in random directions very, very easily. Now, bear in mind the nuclear engines have abysmal thrust-to-weight ratio. You can see how sensitive the orbital line is relative to any kind of burn we do. So I actually disabled all but one of the nuclear engines, set its thrust to like 2, and then did some very small burns. You can see, even though we're thrusting at like the lowest we can with an already reduced thrust engine, you can see that orbital line is moving fairly quickly there. So, it's very got to be very careful. Now, I wanted to make sure that we were kind of passing along Dres with its rotation, so I did a quick correction here because I realized I wasn't quite right the first time I did it. Doesn't really matter, to be honest, with Dres because its gravity is so low that gravity turns with or against its rotation. It's not going to be hugely different, but it's nice to just get into the habit of making sure your encounters with planets you're orbiting with the planet's rotation, just so like when you do things like Tylo and Eve where it really, really does matter, you're kind of already used to, you've already got that habit formed. I guess just time warp up now. I'm using the mod Better Time Warp to just speed up the process by which we can warp in deep space. In case you were wondering what that little UI was that popped up on the screen for a second. And now I'm just stalling time for us to reach. Oh, look at that. 12. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I've been naming the ships just the number. So the first mission we did, the ship was called 1. Second one we did was 2. I think you can figure out where this is going. So the 12, there you go. The entire tech tree took 12 ships to do, with the, whole gimping of I can only take science from one biome per planet or moon. So we've been all over the solar system. We've been to Moho, the closest planet to the sun. We've been to Eeloo, which is usually the furthest planet from the sun. We've been to Dres now, Eve, Gilly, Duna, Kerbal and Minmus, and what's the other one called? Mun. We've been all over the place. The only planet we've not actually been to is Jewel. So that could be coming up soon. Although I have said that I would like to go back to doing Life on Lathe. I know a lot of people have been requesting that series to come back, and a lot of people are asking for a Lathe mission in this series. So don't worry, I have not forgotten that Life on Lathe exists. I was just doing some soul searching about where I wanted to take the series. Because I think I probably will reboot the entire thing based on the fact that we now have Breaking Ground and we have all the propellers and ground science units, and just there are a few things I did in that mission that I wasn't particularly happy with that I think I could do better. Now I've done it once, I know where my mistakes were, and I know how I can improve things to be better than they were before. So you may have noticed actually before I keep on going off on tangents, then having to look at the screen and realize, something's just happened that I needed to talk about. So it's just me going, you may have noticed a few seconds ago whilst I was talking about some complete, not relevant subject. Now so much time has passed, it's almost gone into the ancient history. But I did all the science units, science experiments, EVA report, crew report, all of that when we first entered Dres' sphere of influence, just so we could get all the science from space high above the planet, because we're not going to be taking this lander back with us. We're going to ditch it, leave it on the surface of Dres in several pieces. So that's the only opportunity you'll get to do the science from space high above the planet, unless you wanted to take the lander back with you, because we do have enough Delta V to lug this thing all the way back to Kerbin, but I don't know, for the ease and convenience, I'm just going to dump it on the planet. Speaking of the surface of the planet, we are rapidly approaching it. So now I'm going to do the science from space, just above Dres' surface, in space near to Dres. Just because why not do it now? I keep thinking of having to come up with a reason every single time I do something, but I'm hoping that most of it is obvious. I'm also really conscious of I feel like I'm talking very, very quickly. I don't know why. I feel like if I talk faster, I'll get this commentary done, even though the video is a fixed length. I think I'm just a bit buzzed on caffeine, as I usually am when I'm doing videos in a rush. I kind of stress I only literally had 3 hours to do this entire video from designing the rockets to this now, so I hope it's been bearable and tolerable. I'm really hungry, guys. I've got a nice steak marinating downstairs. It's not marinating, it's just getting to room temperature, and I covered it in some salt and some pepper. I'm looking forward to having that. I think it's a sirloin steak, so I'm gonna stop talking about it. It's making me more hungry. There is the canyon, by the way. I think I could describe how I got the canyon encounter, but I'm hoping that just by watching me doing the normal inclination change and doing some quick puffs retrograde to point myself towards the canyon, it's easy enough to kind of see. And at this point, like I said in this series, hopefully most of the stuff in Kerbal Space Program is no longer a foreign concept to you. So this is all just examples of me doing slightly more precise maneuvering. But I've already talked about accurate landing and stuff in my Blunderbirds videos, I suppose. So I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I thought it'd be nice to do a little journey down the canyon, soak in the sights of these sheer cliffs, and Valentina and Bob can ponder about its origins and why things just be this way. So we have enough Delta V in this lander. I deliberately put in lots of Delta V in this lander so we could do some nice canyon hopping down those dark, frigid ridges. And also we can try and find a flat spot to land on, I suppose. So I wanted to find a nice deep spot, just so we could say we went all the way down to the very dark depths of the Dres Canyon. And yeah, this looks like a nice spot here. It looked flat. It was very, very dark. I did bring some lights on this lander, which helped, but it was still pretty difficult to figure out if the ground I was above was completely flat. And actually, in this case, it wasn't. I had to do a little hop to an area slightly further down the slope. I mean, it doesn't matter, I suppose, but it's just nicer to know that you've landed on a flat surface. I guess it might not matter for you, but it matters for me. And this is my playthrough, darn it. Please don't demonetize me. So I'm gonna just land on a flatter space. Not quite good. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful example of how definitely is a safe way to fly landers. And touchdown. There we go. Like I said, Dres's surface gravity is pretty forgiving. It's not quite as good as somewhere like Minmus, but it's still pretty light. So you can touch down fairly high at fairly high speeds, and you won't do any damage. And we can just time warp up to be in the sunlight, so this video isn't too dark. And there we are. What a lovely shot there. So without further ado, we can get Bob on EVA, and we can take the data from all of our science experiments. We can do the seismometer experiment as well. We couldn't do that earlier because it only works when you're landed somewhere. So we can do that as well as all the others. I don't know, that was a weird detail to include, but there we are. That's just the kind of content I like to provide, guys. Lots of useless filler information. I'm also restoring the Science Junior and Mystery Goo units just out of habit, really. We don't really need to restore them at this point because I guess from you guys' point of view doing this mission, you'd want to, because then you can go to a different biome and get more science. But for me, first of all, I don't need it because we now have enough to unlock the rest of the tech tree. But also, I am still following my rule of only one biome per planet or moon, at least in terms of, getting science from. There's Bob. And Valentina can also come on an EVA because she hasn't left the Kerbin before in this save file. So there's a lovely little photograph of them posing. I don't know who's taking the photo. I guess Bob set up a tripod. He takes his Instagram account very seriously. He's nearly at 1,600 followers, much like myself. If you guys want to follow my Instagram, what a great plug. I don't post very often, and most of the things I post are just like trash posts, but whatever. I think it's pretty fun nonetheless. You guys might enjoy it. Who knows? I decided to check out this little surface feature here. I think it's part of Breaking Ground, so you wouldn't have this if you don't have the DLC, but I thought it'd be nice to visit. I've never seen these surface features before because I've never been to Dres after getting Breaking Ground, so this is kind of a nice little thing to see here. Bob doing his greatest Simba impression here on Pride Rock. And then he can jump down. Val is sort of looking at him disapprovingly from the ground. I guess Bob is on the ground as well, but from the landing site. We could do an EVA down and get ready. I guess there's not much we really need to do in addition to what we've already done on the surface. We've got our surface sample, we've got our EVA report, we've planted our flag, the most important part of any Kerbal expedition to another planet or moon. Once Bob's finished scraping his face along the surface of the rock there, he can waddle his way back very slowly. I think we just do an EVA jetpack maneuver instead. You may have noticed, actually, in case any of you are wondering why I don't have any solar panels on this ship, you may have seen it through the service bay there, but all my ships, pretty much as soon as I unlocked that piece, have been powered by the RTG, which is like, it doesn't require solar panels. And for the Dres Canyon, which doesn't receive much sunlight, and indeed we're at Dres, which is fairly high above the sun, so the solar panels aren't that efficient, it's better to rely on things like RTGs. So that's why I'm using RTGs for this mission rather than solar panels. So, it doesn't take much to get back into Dres orbit, so I'm waiting till the target ship is fairly close to directly above us, and then we're going to perform a burn. I would say start pointing flat straight away, but we are in the middle of a deep canyon, so I had to go vertical a little bit first just to make sure we were definitely going to clear the canyon's ridge, and then I just sort of kept burning until I got the maneuver nodes, the encounter nodes fairly close. It did our inclination change. I got a close separation. Like I've already talked about docking, the easy to explain way for beginners in this series. Now I'm just sort of flexing, I just want to get back to the ship really quickly. But to talk about my thought process very quickly, I saw that our target was going to be behind us at the closest encounter, so I raised our apoapsis to be above our target's orbit, and then I kept on doing that until our nodes got as close as they were probably going to get, and then I looked at what I needed to do, and I could see they were out of alignment in terms of their tilt, so all I had to do was a normal inclination change, and look at that, we had a 0 kilometer separation very, very soon after takeoff, which is a pretty nice thing to achieve. Maybe not the most efficient way of docking, but we had more than enough fuel in both the lander and the mothership, so it wasn't an issue about being incredibly efficient with our maneuvers. But still, I think it was, pretty cheap in terms of an overall burn. And then we can do the certified Lowne lazy method, copyrighted method of docking to get the ships back together. But you may have noticed I did pack 40 units of monopropellant and indeed monopropellant thrusters on that lander in case you're not quite confident enough to do it yourself. Well, I say I put 40 units of monopropellant in that lander. They just come with that lander command pod by default. Now, I took Valentina out on an EVA, took the data from the lander can, and then stored it in the kind of mothership's command pod. And then for some reason, I boarded her back onto the lander for some unknown reason, even though it was me that I did it. And this was like half an hour ago in real time for me. I still don't know why. I must have had a mind blank or something, and I just put her on the lander can. And now I started to deorbit the lander, undocked it. I got ready to move the mothership away, and I just happened to notice that Valentina was no longer among the crew. And I was like, oh God, she's back on board the lander for some reason. So I quickly had to get her on an EVA, and she sort of, yeeted her way over, and it was all fine. But things very nearly, poor old Valentina on her first expedition, she not only had to endure this tiny capsule with Jebediah and Bob for company, but she also nearly died, which actually I think is part of the job description for Kerbals in general, so she probably wasn't too traumatized by it, but even so, I'm sorry, Valentina. So we're going to do a set Kerbin as our target, just going to create a big prograde burn. Our descending node is one of the places in which our orbital line intersects Kerbins, and just by dragging out prograde, you can see we actually got a Kerbin encounter without needing to do much modification beyond just a prograde burn. So that was nice. And then after that, all it took was a little bit of tweaking, zoomed in with Kerbin as our focus on the map screen, some minor prograde adjustments, and then you're sort of tweaking with the normal and anti-normal nodes. We've got a fairly nice and low periapsis. I was aiming for about 30 kilometers, which is fine. Again, we can easily do a radial adjustment once we've actually entered Kerbin's sphere of influence. So it's not hugely, paramount that you get it dead on, but it's nice to be able to just do it and not have to worry about things as you go along on the journey. Now, things were a little bit wobbly here. I wasn't quite sure at the time, but it's now dawned on me that I transferred the remaining liquid fuel from the lander into just one of the side-mounted liquid fuel tanks on this thing, so that's probably what was offsetting the balance. I think at the time I just assumed the SAS module at the bottom of the ship, and indeed the reaction wheel system inside the command pod itself, would compensate for this, but evidently made the thing a little bit imbalanced. But it wasn't too much of an issue. I think that's probably why our actual orbital line didn't end up quite the same as our maneuver node, but it's a fairly easy fix, guys, do not worry. All it took was a slight burn along the normal vector on the nav ball. I don't want to start burning along to target just then, but along the normal node, and as you can see, our inclination is fixed. Now we just need to bring our periapsis back down again by doing another burn towards the retrograde vector. And you can see me doing that there. And you may have noticed as well, I turned off all the nuclear engines except one again and reduced the remaining ones thrust to way down. Just so we could easily do that burn without having to worry about overshooting things. But there we have it. We have our Kerbin encounter there. Nothing much more now to do for this mission other than just time warp down and wait for that encounter to materialize. So I'm just going to use better time warp again to get our maximum warp rate a little bit higher than the stock value, because the stop time warp thing is so painfully slow when you're going somewhere beyond Juna's height. So it's a great mod. Time control is another good sister mod if you can't get better time warp working for some reason. But there we are. There is Kerbin. Our Kerbals are very happy to see their home 1 year and 145 days into their mission. I'm just going to lower our periapsis slightly. I'm aiming for 30 kilometers. In the end, I got to 29.9 kilometers, so pretty close. And we can time warp down, making sure to, of course, detach your transfer stage at the last possible second to enjoy a nice firework display on the way down. But now that's out of the way, we can just let the ablative heat shield do the rest of the work for us. And again, ablator, very, very powerful in this game. We're not even going to use half of what we have, and we are rendering at ludicrous speed. So fast, in fact, that both Jebediah and Valentina blacked out. I mean, Bob did as well, but Jebediah and Valentina's have much higher thresholds for blacking out from G-forces, and even they lost consciousnness briefly. But it's okay, because Kerbals, they're resilient things, and even when they're unconscious, they won't die from G-forces. I don't know why. I don't know what my intention was with that sentence, but it doesn't matter because the mission is now over. Look at that beautiful cinematic pan around. We can get a beautiful sunset shot of our capsule, but there's no time to waste. We need to recover it, and look at that, 2,308 science units earned. We only needed about 500, so we've easily got enough to finish the tech tree. Big moment there. We now have the big probe core. Fairly anticlimactic final part to unlock. But there we go. We have so much science from all of the planets except Jewel. But every other planet we have science from, either from its surface. In fact, yes, from its surface. So there we are. The tech tree is finished. and so therefore this series is finished. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the journey. On this will probably be the final time I unlock the tech tree, at least on this YouTube channel, before Kerbal Space Program 2 comes out. Maybe, hopefully, I don't know. But that means that we can now look forward to doing more things with the new Breaking Ground parts that aren't new anymore, but they are new relative to this channel. So I hope you get excited for that. Leave any suggestions for future missions that you would like to see in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. On screen there is a link to the full playlist on the left and a video chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm on the right. There's also a link to Patreon and to subscribe if you'd like to check those things out, and in the description you'll find links to my merchandise, Twitter and Discord and Instagram. But that's it. I think I've said everything I needed to say. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good day.